Hey, Scott from mygrowthrings.com here. Here once again is my garage shop, and as promised, this week we're going to go over the lubricating of the internal organs of your Shopsmith Mark V. Now, just a quick note, what I'm about to show you is true of the mechanical Shopsmith Mark V headstocks. This is also true of the mechanical Mark VII headstock and a few others that are thrown in the mix. If you happen to have a Power Pro headstock, there is nothing inside your machine to lubricate. You would want to put graphite on the headstock lock, but other than that, it's pretty much maintenance free until it needs maintenance. Okay, now inside of a Shopsmith Mark V mechanical headstock, one with the speed dial that we spin, you've got somewhere between 7 and 8 ball bearings. They're sealed for life ball bearings. Now, that doesn't mean your life. That means just the life of those bearings. There's nothing you can do to lubricate them. So they're either running well or they need to be replaced. Why do I say 7 or 8? Well, let's count. We got 2 bearings right here. We got 1 bearing on the quill. Some quills have a second bearing, so that's 3 or 4. Then we have 2 bearings down at this height. One is behind the speed control, and one is here at the idler shaft. Now, the one at the idler shaft is very special. It's actually an automotive water pump bearing assembly, which is the same water pump bearing assembly that's used on several of the Shopsmith special purpose tools. We'll get into that one of these days because it's pretty clever. And then down inside your motor, you've got at least 2 ball bearings. So all of those ball bearings need nothing from you except for just keep the dust off of them. And that if dust impacts the exterior of a sealed bearing, it actually can begin to wick out some of the lubrication. So we do want to keep those clean. Now, we can cause damage to the small bearing here, and that damage is not caused by not lubricating the bearing, but lubricating the shaft that bearing is interacting with. So let's pull off the belt cover, open up the back, and take a look at what's going on inside. 3 tips before you pull the headstock off. First one, remove your quill handle. There's a chance it'll get damaged. You might as well just remove it. Second, take your power cord and wrap it around and back on both sides from the quill lock to the depth lock, and then just tuck that under. That'll help you maintain control. And then the last thing, which is something I forgot to do, and that is we're going to loosen the headstock lock, but not just to the point where it's loose. Continue to loosen it to the point where those wedges are locked in place. Now when I slide the headstock off, both of these will be in sync with one another, and that'll make it a lot easier to reinstall the headstock onto the tubes.
Now the first thing I'm going to do is to drop the Mark V down from its casters onto the ground. We don't need this rolling around on us. The next thing, I'm going to take the cord, making sure that it's not underneath the bench tube, and I'm going to wrap that around the quill lock to the quill depth gauge, as I already demonstrated. I have to take off the tie bar that is connecting the way tubes together. So if you slide everything off to the right-hand side towards the pivot point, that'll lower the center of gravity and make this a much easier task. So unlocking the lock, raising it up high enough that you can reach the set screws, we'll loosen those set screws and then pull that tie bar off. Now those set screws may be on top of your tie bar, just depends upon when your machine was made. Next, we're going to move the headstock to about the center point of the tubes, and then bring the carriage over and lock it down so that it will clear the tip of the quill. So next we're going to put a 2x4 underneath the table tubes. Now as we lower the table tubes down onto that 2x4, it's going to raise up the way tubes. Now, that 2x4 needs to be about 14 inches long or so to work. Now then we're going to lock the table height in place and then easily slip the headstock right off the tubes.
And just a hint, go to Harbor Freight or your automotive store, pick yourself up one of these magnetic parts bins. They are fantastic as you are disassembling your equipment. Gives you a place to put all those parts. Also, it's a great time to take off the quill lever, which I just broke. My headstock rolled off of this table because I sat it up here and didn't pay attention, and that part just got bent. Wow. Yeah, I'd say that got bent. Depending upon when your Mark V was made, you either have 2 sheet metal screws holding the belt cover on and up to, I think the count is 5. There may be one at the very top, and there may be 2 more on here. And then to take this off, I have to take off the drive hubs. So there's where we need our 5/32 hex wrench. Now we're ready to go. Your rear access hole is either going to be behind a pivoting nameplate, or a nameplate that pulls off, or a nameplate that once you get it off has no access hole. The oldest versions of the Mark V do not have an access point here. What we have going on inside of this is, as we're changing the speed, if we're increasing the speed, this little arm is pulling to the left and it's pulling on this little wire bail. That bail is passing through a small button that in turn is pulling on a small ball bearing. That can't be lubricated, but where this can run into problems is if it has to push or pull against some great force. And what forces do we have? Well, one thing we have is a V-belt that's running inside of this pulley that is a variable speed pulley, but that shaft should be moving smoothly. So if we rotate the quill around, you will see that there is a hole. That is lubrication point number 1. So we are going to add a few drops of oil into that about every 25 hours of use. There we go. Now, if the V-belt is off, I can open and close that shaft many times and be sure that that oil is well circulated. I'm doing this the speed way without removing. Now let's go ahead and remove it. First thing to advise you is make sure that the machine is unplugged. You do not want to interact with any of those bare wires. Trust me, I've also taken the jewelry off of my hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach in and I'm going to pull that bail out towards the back. Now for that to happen, I have to push in this little spring, little leaf spring right here. So this is going to be very difficult for you to see, but I will do my best to stay out of your way. Nope. You're not going to be able to see that. So now here on the bottom, with the speed dial on the top set at full speed, this pulley is going to want to close, making it a large pulley. And so because it's a large pulley and the upper sheaves being open make it act as a small pulley with the belt running low in it, I can just get this belt started over the edge of the large pulley and then just continue to turn around until it slips completely off. So now that belt is off the pulley. If I then push it upwards, pushing that slack up, I can close the upper pulley far enough. Change the angle for you. I can now close the upper pulley and can drag that belt right out of there and past the speed control. So the belt is now removed. With or without the belt, I can reach in here and I can manually open the pulley. So one of the things that you can do, depending upon how old your Mark V is, there may be a hole here for oil, there may not. If there is, you can line that spring up and give it a little bit of a pull to give you access to the oil hole. And here let's add 3 or 4 drops of oil. Doesn't do me any good to put the oil on the spring. It doesn't hurt anything either. And then with my thumb against the shaft, with my fingers, I can pull this and move it around a few times. Now look at that. That tells me that this thing is in really bad need of oil down here on the motor shaft. Wowee, that is super tight. I'm going to put some directly on the shaft there as well. I haven't felt one like that in a while. That should not be like that. That's moving like a piston. That should just spring right back, snap right back. Now I'm going to go right in directly onto the shaft, which is what I would do if I had an old machine that didn't have an oil hole. Now we're starting to get somewhere. There we go. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? I'll bet you this machine hasn't received a drop of oil since it was new. That's beautiful. And I don't care if I add more oil than it needs. It'll fling it off and won't harm a thing. Woo! So if you've been around the inside of a Mark V headstock, you may have noticed that I did something wrong. Do you spot it? That's right. When I removed the headstock, I didn't bother to orient the locking wedges so that they would be properly aligned when I go to slide it back onto the weigh tubes. So while I'm here, go ahead and rotate those around. There's a trick to prevent that problem. If when you remove the headstock, if you loosen that lock and loosen it so far that the wedges are locked in place. I'm just going to have to fight that when I get to it. Also notice on this version of the Mark V, we've got wires here that we need to be careful of when we slide the headstock back onto the weigh tubes. This whole thing needs to be blown out, doesn't it? Look at all that dust. So just let me remind you, you do not have to remove your headstock. I do that kind of out of habit, and if I hadn't have removed it, I wouldn't have ruined my quill handle. So you do what makes sense to you. Also, let me remind you, we're going to do a follow-up to this midweek, that midweek episode of what I call Stumped Q&A. And so be sure to leave your questions, comments, and cheap shots in a comment below, and we'll be sure to address those. Also, in the video description, I will put a link to everything I use today, and especially to the oil that I use. That oil is available on Amazon. It's very inexpensive. You'll get enough to last you a lifetime for $5-6. So be sure to check that out. All right, make it a great week.